Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 2023 edition of Unfound Now. And I'm doing something different this month, just because it's been on my mind for a little while. It's been a topic that's been on my mind, and I'm going to get into it today as in this episode. I've spoken about it a little bit in a recent episode of Unfound. I've spoken a little bit about it during the live show a couple times, but now I get to devote a little more time to this topic. I think it's very, very important. Today, for this month, I want to talk about the disappearance of Bao Fan. First name, B-A-O, last name, F-A-N, and he's a 52-year-old, and he is from China, and he was in China. And I realize, is it in Chinese culture that they put like the first names last names first? And so I apologize. Is Bao his first name or his last name? I get confused. I'm a stupid American. But in news reports, it's Bao Fan, B-A-O, and then the second name is F-A-N. Before I go any further, I want to remind you to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you could. And please, we need support here at Unfound. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And there is now a 10% discount if you choose to sign up for an entire year. Or if you want to become a YouTube member, just hit the join button below. That also helps out what we do here behind the scenes, helping our guests out in a variety of ways. I just don't interview these people and they go on their merry way. I like to continue to help them, and your support, your monetary support, certainly helps me and my assistants do that. As far as Unfound Now, we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary. This got started in June of 2020, right there during the COVID days. And to remind all of you, this got started for 3 specific reasons. Number 1, education. I love teaching people about disappearances. Why they happen, when they happen, how do they happen, how they are investigated, what are the problems, and all of that. I love that part of my job. Number 2, publicity. Of course, it's a little unique for this disappearance this month. But publicity, every disappearance could use a little bit more publicity. And then number 3 is just to show the reaction. How do I respond to a disappearance when I read it for the first time? Although, once again, for this month, regarding the disappearance of Bao Fan, it's going to be a little unique. And you'll know what I mean here in a moment. But once again, education, publicity, and reaction. Maybe learning how I react to these disappearances. Maybe that can help you in reacting to them when you read them or listen to, watch a video or whatever else. Maybe kind of reading between the lines or listening between the lines, seeing what is mentioned, seeing what is not mentioned, and how to draw inferences from those items. So, like I said, this is a unique one, and the 3 major points for this episode are: disappearance, the term, doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. Number 2, the unseen connection. And number 3, a message to all. So now I'm going to read the Wikipedia part, not all, but part of the Wikipedia bio on Bao Fan. Yes, he has his own Wikipedia page. Bao Fan, he was born October 18th, 1970, is a Chinese investment banker and investor. The chairman and CEO of China Renaissance, which he founded in 2005. In 2015, Bao was featured on Bloomberg Markets as one of the 50 most influential people, ranking number 22. Early life and education. Bao was born in Shanghai to parents and worked in the government. In reference to his parents' placement within the government, Bao notes they were nothing senior. I'm not one of the princelings. He went to high school in the United States. He received degrees from Shanghai's Fudan University and the Norwegian School of Management. Career: Bao worked for Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, and Morgan Stanley again in London, New York, and Hong Kong. In 2000, Bao left Morgan Stanley to become Chief Strategic Officer at the Chinese startup Asian Info Holdings. In 2005, Bao founded China Renaissance, a leading Chinese financial institution dedicated to China's new economy businesses. Started as a financial advisory firm, China Renaissance core business now consists of investment banking, investment management, and wealth management. As of June 30th, 2020, China Renaissance had advised on approximately 980 transactions worth over $146 billion since its inception, and the company's private equity funds had, I'll move on from that. China Renaissance Holdings Limited was listed in the main board of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2018 under the stock ticker 1911 HK. All right, moving on. And then China Renaissance started a private equity investment management business in 2013. Bao was the founding partner and chief investment officer of China Renaissance's investment management business. Huxing Growth Capital, the investment flagship of China Renaissance, is invested in over 100 new economy entrepreneurs. I say that word weirdly, and homegrown companies, and has helped over 30 of these firms go public in China and international markets. Its private equity funds recorded an average multiple of invested capital of 2.5 times, an internal rate of return of 33% as of June 30th of 2020. The portfolio companies of Huxing Growth Capital include Potmart, Cashew, Bikey, Xiaovang, and a bunch of other companies that I'm not going to try to massacre their names because I'm a stupid American. But you get the idea. He's a big deal. He is a billionaire. I actually found that his net worth is $1.7 billion. Now, but why am I talking about him? Well, I'm going to mention that right now. Billionaire technology dealmaker Bao Fan is cooperating with Chinese authorities conducting an investigation, the bank says. Renaissance Holdings reported 11 days ago, this is in February, that Mr. Bao had gone missing. Mr. Bao is the chief executive and founder of China Renaissance Holdings and a leading deal broker in China whose clients include top technology companies like Didi and Meituan. The firm's shares slumped after Mr. Bao went missing but rose on Monday. The board has become aware that Mr. Bao is currently cooperating in an investigation being carried out by certain authorities in the People's Republic of China, the bank said in a filing to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The companies say it will duly cooperate and assist with any lawful request from the relevant PRC authorities, People's Republic of China authorities, if and when made, it added. The announcement was the first time that China Renaissance had given a reason for the disappearance of its founder. However, it did not provide any details about the investigation or Mr. Bao's whereabouts. So he is missing. He's been missing since February, and as you can tell here, he was certainly disappeared by the Chinese government. Moving on, I want to read you this. This is not a new phenomenon. At least it's not. It's recently new within the last 10 years. Allow me to read another article. Authorities took Mr. Bao away earlier this month to assist in an investigation into a former colleague, Kong Lin, the company's former president, according to the Reuters news agency. Mr. Bao's disappearance comes against the backdrop of a crackdown on leading technology companies by Chinese authorities. In late 2020, Alibaba founder Jack Ma also disappeared from public view for 3 months after making comments critical of market regulators. He had been due to publicly list his digital payments firm Ant Financial, which would have most likely made him the richest man in China. Mr. Mao's disappearance also comes after a series of cases of high-profile Chinese executives going missing as part of Chinese President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. In 2015 alone, at least 5 executives became unreachable, including Fosun Group Chairman Guo Guangchang. The company later said he was assisting with investigations over a personal matter. Chinese-Canadian businessman Zhao Jinhua was also taken in 2017. He had been one of China's richest people and last year was jailed for corruption. Mr. Bao is seen as a titan in China's tech industry, having executed many of the trades that have shaped its online consumer economy. He founded China Renaissance in 2005 after a banking career at Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse. In 2018 article, Mr. Bao wrote that his company had crossed paths with 70% of the internet companies known by the Chinese public. So this is a thing in China now. This is a thing. Rich people going missing. And maybe you don't know about rich Chinese businessmen, but maybe you all might also remember within the last few years there was a Chinese tennis star who went missing for a while. And when the World Tennis Federation started asking, hey, where is she? She finally did an interview, but you could tell that she was being coached. And why was that? Well, she had made some sexual allegations against somebody within the Communist Party. This person had allegedly raped her or something, and as soon as that got out, suddenly she wasn't allowed to play tennis anymore. So, moving on to those 3 points that I originally brought up in the beginning. Number 1, the term disappearance doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. Number 2, the unseen connection. And number 3, a message to all. So number 1, the term disappearance does not mean the same thing everywhere. And in fact, there is a Wikipedia page devoted to this. I'm just going to read the first part of it. An enforced disappearance or forced disappearance is a secret abduction or imprisonment of a person by a state or political organization or by a third party with the authorization, support, or acquiesce of a state or political organization, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the person's fate and whereabouts with the intent of placing the victim outside the protection of the law. According to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which came into force on July 1st, 2002, when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed at any civilian population, a forced disappearance qualifies as a crime against humanity, not subject to statute of limitations in international criminal law. On December 20th, 2006, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Often, forced disappearances implies murder whereby a victim is abducted, may be illegally detained, and is often tortured during interrogation, ultimately killed, and the body disposed of secretly. The party committing the murder has plausible deniability as there is no evidence of the victim's death. States are obliged under international human rights law to return the remains of the forcibly disappeared persons to their families. Disappearing political rivals is also a way for regimes to enforce complicity in populations. Forced disappearances can result in the widespread pretense that everything is normal, while acting as a terror tactic against further potential dissidents. An example of this was in the Dirty War in Argentina, or the action of both sides of the Troubles, and the Troubles was a issue of the 1970s in Ireland, Northern Ireland. So that's the first one. So the term disappearance is the way we use it, for example, in the United States, is something different in China, for example. And I'm going to get into some other countries. But we're talking about this guy because this is the most recent example of a billionaire businessman in China being forced to disappear. That is certainly what happened to him. And here's what we also should realize. He's not helping. Well, I guess he is helping in an investigation. But we also all know nobody needs to be disappeared and taken away and where he can't communicate with anybody to assist in any sort of investigation that would be done in China or anywhere else. But forced disappearances are a thing in the world. More common than we might all imagine, or maybe all of you might imagine. Whereas to me, this has kind of been a topic that's been on my radar for a long time, even, dare I say, well before I started Unfound. Because I've always been into disappearances, and if you're into disappearances, eventually you're going to run across those ones where you figure out this wasn't some personal spat, this wasn't a husband killing his wife, this wasn't somebody who walked off. This was somebody who was disappeared by a government for a particular reason. So that's number one. We must remember, we use the D word, disappearance, in everything we do at Unfound, but that word has a different meaning in several parts of the world. So moving on to number two, called the unseen connection. This has actually got onto my mind that I wanted to talk about this when we did the disappearance of Alfred Turner in New Zealand. And what did I bring up, if you remember, that in that episode is that New Zealand and the United States are in many ways different countries. But in many ways, they are very much the same, especially when it comes to the law. It very well may be that we have different attitudes, for example, toward guns and some other things toward religion. And of course, we in the United States, we have a Bill of Rights. They do not have a Bill of Rights in New Zealand. But in general, you're still innocent and proven guilty in New Zealand. And as an American, you could go to New Zealand and get around probably just fine. You wouldn't find it too weird. But so it was on my mind in covering Athel's disappearance that its attitude toward disappearance is very similar to the attitude that the United States has, that Canada has, that Australia has, that Germany has, that France has, that England has, that Ireland has, that, I don't need to mention countries of the former British Empire, which the United States was, which New Zealand was, which was Australia was. Germany, of course, was not part of the British Empire. Neither was France. We could talk about, Japan or South Korea and some other countries that have nothing culturally that's similar with the United States, who also treat disappearances the same way. They investigate them. They treat them as, incidents. They're going to take them seriously. And there's no belief that the government came in and just dragged somebody away for some particular reason. But there is a direct connection, and what I mean by the unseen connection when it comes to disappearances, there is as I write it here, let me find it. Respect for human rights is inversely proportional to disappearances and the investigations of them. Remember that. If you have a country that does not even recognize what human rights are, and China is certainly one of them, and I'll go through this list, and yes, I'm going to talk about the United States too. I'm not, I'm not going to protect my own country from criticism. But you find countries that respect human rights, and you're going to find disappearances that are actually investigated. You're going to find probably some sort of website where it lists the people who are missing. There's going to be freedom to talk about those disappearances, no matter who that person is, rich or poor, of any race, of any religion, or anything else, just like we have in the United States and other countries that are kind of like us when it comes to human rights. And then that is the unseen connection with everything we talk about at Unfound, is that the reason that disappearances even get talked about and investigated, even sometimes, although they're investigated poorly, the reason they are even a thing that can be talked about and people can get engaged personally with them is because of human rights that are respected by the government. Remember, we are born with our rights. We are not given rights by the government. We are born with our rights. At least as an American, that's what you're supposed to think. And when you find governments that agree with that, you will find this open dialogue about disappearances. And then we have situations like what you have in China. Here's what I think I know. No person in China can openly, vocally talk about Bao Fan being disappeared by the government and criticize it. That's what I think I know. Now, there are other countries that are listed in this forced disappearance page on Wikipedia. Algeria, Bangladesh, Chile, maybe going back to like the Pinochet era, China, Egypt, Iran. Yes, Mexico, our neighbor to the south. There are forced disappearances there. Not necessarily by the government, but we know that there are vast portions of Mexico that aren't controlled by the government. They're controlled by cartels, and we know what cartels do. Russia, of course, Russia has shown the ability to go after people in other countries and get away with it. North Korea. Is there any surprise there? Who the heck knows what's going on inside North Korea? Who knows? Those people who live in North Korea might not even. The only reason they know the United States exists is because they think that we want to destroy them with nuclear weapons. Otherwise, they have no idea how the average American lives. Now, what about the United States? What came up here? Well, causing the detaining of people at Guantanamo Bay, which is down in Cuba. It's a Marine base down there. And detaining these people, what I guess many Americans would call terrorists, without their due process rights. Yanking them from somewhere, disappearing them, not telling anybody where they're going, and putting them in Guantanamo Bay. That's how the United States got on this list. But it's clear there are many governments in the world that don't even care about disappearances. Not at all. It's just something that happens. Of course, then we have to think about, do regular disappearances even occur given the surveillance of the people in a country like China, where they're using facial recognition technology and everything else? How do you determine the difference between somebody who chose to go missing, walked out of his or her life, and somebody who was actually disappeared by the government? I'm guessing it's hard to say. This only gets attention, over the planet because Bao Fan was a person, a well-known person, not just in China, but everywhere because of the work that he has done. So once again, going back to the unseen connection, there is a direct or inversely proportional connection. The more rights you have, the more likely the disappearances are going to get investigated, the more likely you're going to be able to talk about them, that families will be involved in everything else. As human rights become less respected, then disappearances just are not a thing. And the government can do whatever it wants regarding them, even disappearing its own citizens. Now, the question may be, well, in these countries, do the citizens really like this? For example, in China, if they know about Bao Fan going missing, what do they really think about it? Hard to tell. Hard to tell. It very well maybe you ask some of them and say, well, if there's corruption going on, then if he knows something about it, he should be, detained and asked about it and everything. I don't know if they really think about it in United States terms, where we think, well, somebody could help in a corruption investigation and still go home to his family every night. I don't know if that occurs to the average Chinese person. And if that person would ever voice this publicly, I don't know. Certainly in some of these countries that are even stricter, like North Korea, of course, they're not going to say anything. So the unseen connection, we can never forget about human rights when we talk about disappearances. That we are so free to talk about disappearances in the United States is a reflection of the rights that we have in the United States. And that they get investigated, even if poorly, is a reflection on the rights and our attitude toward the law in the United States. It's not the way it is in most places. You find a place that doesn't respect human rights, and you're going to find a lot of weird disappearances going on there that never get investigated. Moving on, number 3, a message to all. I think what this shows is that governments are way stronger than corporations or businesses than individuals. I know there's a big fear about corporations control this and control that. You don't hear about any businesses forcibly disappearing anybody. Right? Not anywhere. Not even in China, dare I say it. There are no businesses disappearing people or employees. Certainly there are beefs that pop up, and one business person may kill another or something like that, but I think you know what I'm saying here. Another message, once again, this message to all of you. Bao Fan. Oh, yeah, he's assisting in an investigation, all right, by being forced to cooperate. And dare I say it, he's probably being brainwashed. He is being shown who the boss is. That is why he's not be out in public. That's why he's not allowed to go home to his family. I don't even know if he's married and have kids or whatever, but that's why he's been disappeared since February of 2023, and now it's late April of 2023. He's somewhere, and on a daily basis, maybe an hourly basis, maybe on a minutely basis, he is being reminded on who the boss is in China, and that's the ruling party. And all it takes is they look at the Jack Ma and all these people. Were they probably doing something that might have been illegal? Maybe. Maybe. Nobody's perfect. Mistakes are made. People cutting corners and things. But I'm more inclined to believe that this is all about showing these people who are rich Chinese, they don't run the country, that it's somewhere else. This is what we can do to you if you don't go along with us. And this is not, thing is, like I said, this is not China of 20 years ago. This kind of stuff, not as common in China as it has been over the last 10 years with the guy who's been in charge there. Things have changed. Things have changed big time there. Now, what are we to think of this? Where is this going? I think this is probably just going to get worse in China and these other countries. A lot of these countries are losing population. People are moving out. It's hard to get motivated about reproducing when these things are going on. And these crackdowns will happen when the governments feel that their power is in jeopardy. Maybe see this in Iran. It's disappearing people right now. Girls dancing to Western music without their traditional Muslim guard on. Police will track them down. They'll disappear. And what is also, I think, bringing this on is more and more people are finding out that, the way we're living our lives in these countries is not what's going on in the United States or Canada, England, and everything else. They start realizing that, man, it kind of sucks here. And then those people will be disappeared too. So I want to read this to you. News of Alabama. This is about Jack Ma, who's probably the most famous of these people who had this happen to him. And once again, he was released back in the public. But what happens? Not one word about what went on. I don't know if he's even allowed to leave China. Certainly not the man he used to be. But news of Alibaba co-founder Jack Ma's disappearance from public view has driven heated speculation around social media in recent days. This is an older article. The whereabouts of the billionaire entrepreneur are unknown, and Alibaba isn't commenting. Like I said, this was an article for some years ago. Formerly China's richest person, Ma's last public sighting was at Shanghai's Bund Summit in late October, where he criticized Chinese regulators for stifling innovation. Like I said, we're going to show him who's boss. You do this in the United States, maybe you'll get called up to Capitol Hill, and some senators will yell at you, and it'll be great theater and entertainment, and everybody's just doing it so they can get on camera. In China, it's a little different. By early November, he was reportedly summoned to a meeting, once again, this is some years ago, to a meeting with Chinese authorities, who then pulled the plug on the planned IPO of his fintech giant Ant Group on November 3rd, just 2 days before it was slated to begin trading. Alibaba is now under investigation for monopolistic behavior. This is all crap, by the way, according to a statement from the government's market supervision arm. And the billionaire has not been spotted since late October. Alibaba and Ant Group did not respond to Forbes' request for comment. In a report on Tuesday citing a person familiar with the matter, CNBC reported that Ma was not missing, just laying low. Sure he was. These guys, and maybe it's happened to some women too, rich women there, they're being taken and they're being reminded who's boss. They're being disappeared for this very reason. Ma's absence from the public sphere is part of a larger pattern. As Forbes has reported before, in recent years, at least a half a dozen other billionaires and wealthy businessmen have vanished from public life for a period of time after running afoul of the Chinese Communist Party. In December 2015, reports emerged that Guangcheng, former founder and chairman of investment and conglomerate Fosun International, had gone missing. Social media posts claimed that witnesses saw Guo being taken away by the police at Shanghai airport. And yes, this is one of those things, they bang on your door at 3 a.m, come with us. Guo was called Chinese Warren Buffett. Then in January 16, fast fashion firm Shanghai Mettersband Fashion Accessories also temporarily halted trading of its stock, saying in a filing that it was unable to reach its billionaire founder, Zhao Qingzhan. State-run news group China Daily reported that Zhao was detained by the police to help with a potential insider trading and stock manipulation case. Does that sound familiar? This is how they get away with it. Even though there's the United Nations laws and everything, they get away with it by saying, oh, no, we're not disappearing these people because we hate them and everything. We got to protect them, We got to get them in. We really need to talk to them, and we're afraid, This is who these people are. And then Zhao was back at work, but he did not elaborate on what happened. A rags to riches story. Zhao reportedly quit school at age 12 and tried his hand at carpentry and bricklaying before training as a tailor. He later started Mettersband, which boasts over $800 million in 2019 revenue. His daughter now chairs the company, though Zhao remains its biggest shareholder and has a fortune of $1.3 billion. So this has been going on for a while in China. And then other businessmen have disappeared more recently. Real estate mogul Ren Zhaojiang. Who else is named in this? And it's all the same story. Well, they're helping with an investigation. Yeah, sure they are. So once again, the message to all of you. This is what's going on. I want you to remember this. That these are governments that are doing these things across the world. Not individuals, not corporations, not smaller businesses. Government, which, what we call the police power, have the control, the power to do this. And it's scary. So I just want you to remember that. And so, like I said, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, this topic of forced disappearances in certain parts of the world. It is a real thing. All disappearance theory that we use on Unfound has to be thrown out. when we talk about these situations. It's not applicable at all. What we're talking, of course, about on Unfound are more personal matters. Even when we look at it, like Flight 370 was, I think, one way or another, a personal matter. Although, of course, Jeff Wise thinks the Russian government did it. Willing to talk. I've talked to him about it a few times, but we just have to remember this is what goes on in the world sometimes. And I fear that this is just going to get worse in these countries where this is already happening. So once again, the 3 points for this episode. Disappearance, the term doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. Number 2, in the unseen connection. That is, when you have human rights that are respected, disappearance will still going to happen, but at least they'll get investigated honestly for the most part. And you won't have a government that will be able to do what they're doing in China and elsewhere. And then number 3, a message to all, just reminding all of you that governments are what to fear regarding disappearances, not individuals. Of course, individuals cause disappearances too. But when you hear about these forced disappearances, this just shows you how much more powerful governments are than business and people. Even though government is made up of people, I think you know what I mean. So that's all I have for this April 2023 edition of Unfound Now. A little bit different, but I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Until next time, see ya.